Working with a YouTube agency is a little bit different. I feel like there's a lot more exchange at the very beginning because it's very creative. It's a very creative space. It's a lot less plug and play and a lot more inspiration that's involved.
Welcome to the Happy Clients Podcast, brought to you by Dot & Company. Whether you're a virtual assistant, an agency owner, or a client-facing account manager, we all deal with clients. Lucky for you, client management is what we do best. Now, let's dig in, chat cam life, and have some fun along the way. Cheers to Happy Clients.
We have invited Miss Mandy Miller onto our podcast today, a client account manager extraordinaire and a member of our Dot & Co team. And we're excited to dig right in and talk all about YouTube.
Yeah, it's so exciting to have you here, Mandy. We focus, I would say the majority of our podcast is definitely around Facebook advertising. So adding your perspective today is going to be awesome. So thanks so much for coming.
I'm so happy to be here.
Yay!
This is exciting.
Yeah, you've been around since we've talked about doing this podcast for a long time and finally got it off the ground. So we're just so excited. So let's firstly, of course, learn about you, Mandy. Our audience, tell us about you, your background, and how you got to be a client account manager at Dot & Company.
Oh, man. All right. So I guess I'm a Boston girl that ended up living in Florida way too long and ended up right in the middle and settling at the beach in Wilmington, North Carolina. And I mean, as far as how I got into this whole Dot Academy situation, is through a mutual friend. It always helps when you know somebody. It's always about who you know. And I happen to know Jenna, who's a mutual friend.
And we'll be on our podcast. So listen, keep listening. Yeah.
That's so exciting.
Stay tuned for Jenna.
Yeah, Jenna is a bona fide badass. I will say that. And she's a good friend, but she's also my sounding board for about like 90% of my life decisions. And I just started chatting and she told me about somebody in her mastermind group doing something cool. And so she got my attention and suggested that we connected, and we did.
Mm-hmm. We were, definitely thrilled when you, were introduced to us, but then when you honed in on your YouTube skills and started being a really awesome client account manager, we were so thrilled.
Yeah, it was crazy because it was something, is when I went through the academy and went through all the things, and Taylor told me who I'd be working with, and knowing that it was a YouTube agency, I got really excited because it's a different world. And that's kind of been my MO through my career, is you go from, my degrees in public relations, get into marketing, and then you get into digital marketing, get into all the things, but everybody kind of went the Facebook route first. And then the nature of YouTube is kind of more advanced. And so I kind of felt like it was a huge opportunity, and I was excited about that.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So tell us, let's get into the YouTube ads stuff, because I know our audience is so interested in kind of digging into this side. So Mandy, tell us what your role is inside of the YouTube ad agency and what that looks like day to day for you.
Working with a YouTube agency is a little bit different. I feel like there's a lot more exchange at the very beginning because it's very creative. It's a very creative space. It's a lot less plug and play and a lot more inspiration that's involved. So my role really is to take it from sales. So, our CEO has these really inspiring conversations with people. They decide they're going to do business together, and then it gets handed off. And so when it gets handed off, it's our role to take that vision, that original vision, and, hear the conversations that were had and translate that into a strategy and through the process. So that involves a lot of team members. So where I come into play is coordinating all of that, making sure that the media buyer knows that there's something coming from creative in X amount of days, or ensuring that the client is aware of timelines, because, the nature of video and editing, there's a little bit longer of a timeline involved. So really my role is to take the vision of the CEO and get the client on board and inspired by it, and then see it through. And then
you guys are actually pretty lucky. You kind of work with the best of the best with YouTube. Do you find, Mandy, a lot of clients are coming to you with already like a really great creative behind them, or is your job to kind of start from scratch and create all the video, everything that's going on YouTube? Or do you have some really great assets? Because I know you guys are kind of working with top tier clients, but are you kind of seeing the whole process through, or do you kind of have a good base when you start with these clients?
I'd say it's a mixed bag. So the particular agency that I have been working with, they look to qualify their clients by if they have experienced success already on Facebook, or they've already kind of gotten to a certain point, because Facebook is a good launching point. YouTube makes it a little more involved, and it takes a different approach. And so it's almost easier to start with a baseline. So if something for Facebook worked for you, sure, we can take that and make it into a YouTube style ad. But what it comes down to is not everything that works on Facebook works on YouTube. And it's because it's kind of a different mindset. People are seeking out differently.
You're going
on
to YouTube for a different reason than you're trolling Facebook, right?
It's very much like the YouTube is much farther down the funnel, because if you've invested enough time to sit down and listen to a video, that person's already at a certain stage in their process of evaluating whether or not it's a good decision. So sometimes you can use previous material that's been modified for YouTube style ads, but often, like, the best way and the practice that has the best results is letting our team really do a deep dive into the creative and get into the brains. And so sometimes that takes a deep dive creative call, or it takes a combination of new raw footage that's based off of our scripts, and combining that with B-roll and all of these things. And so I think that's what makes it a little bit different.
Totally. And I think what's good for even agencies owners to know that, there's different levels of like clients. When they're coming in, they're like fully prepared, they're ready to go. They do have all these assets and these great photos and this great video. But then there's also these clients that are totally maybe even bare bones or maybe new to YouTube, but they're still going to work. These ads are still going to work for them, right? So I'm sure you guys kind of vet people accordingly. I don't think there's any shame in our game. We can give a shout out to Viewability and Tom Breeze. You guys are doing a great job for their clients. So yeah, Tom definitely, I feel like he vets people very well and makes sure that they're a good fit for the agency, but definitely at different levels, which is totally cool, right?
Mm-hmm.
It really is. It's an honor to be working with their team, for sure. I love it. And I'm definitely honored to be able to work
everybody go check out Viewability. They're a great team and a really great agency. So go
100%.
over Viewability, check it out.
Coming back to the onboarding of clients, I'm sure there's this huge education piece for a lot of clients too, because YouTube is not as popular, let's say, as Facebook ads or Facebook advertising or even Google. So how much of your role, Mandy, is educating clients on this process?
The education piece is certainly important, because the reason why not everybody does YouTube is because it's a different flavor. It's a different level of investment. Sometimes it's more of, no one had really thought about hiring a film production team or renting a film space. When you're working with a top-notch agency, they want you to have the best raw footage. They want to script it for you in their vision for the outcome that they want to work with. So educating the client on the process is the first step, and letting them know this isn't going to happen by tomorrow, especially if you're planning on filming your footage. Maybe if they have their own internal team, the landscape is different for every client. So it's really comes to, like, at the very beginning, establishing where they're at. Do they have a film team? Do they have access to tools? Is it something that, if they can't film, do we take the angle of using a voiceover? So there's a lot of things to consider at the very beginning, and that all kind of is dictated by the level of experience they have or knowledge they have. Not everybody's savvy in general. They just know that, Facebook worked, and now YouTube is the next mountain to climb. And they're seeking the guidance And then there's some people who are not. So it really is very
Mhm.
dependent on that level of knowledge.
So Mandy, it sounds like there's like a lot of moving parts. So how do you even maintain kind of all those balls that are in the air and kind of keep it together as a client account manager?
Yeah, there's a lot of pieces that are moving, and we're talking different departments, different media buyers. You have the leadership where the vision and the strategies coming from, and you have your technical side. So there are a lot of angles to it to work. So the best way that I've seen, thanks to Taylor's already kind of setting that foundation for us, is really a tool that is centralized, that houses the processes and also the communication channels kind of getting honed in. Where are the important conversations happening? Who needs to know about them? So there's that. So there's tools comes first as the framework, and then having weekly meetings just so that everyone's on the same page. So we have a weekly friends meeting, which is also
That's
invaluable.
fun.
I know it's invaluable because the first 10 minutes of it is getting to like chit chat and build that relationship. And I think that's an integral part of becoming part of an agency, especially as a CAM. I think that that's a big part of the process and keeping that line of communication open. If it's more like a friend, more like somebody you feel like you can communicate with and understands you, it kind of makes it easier to say like, hey, I made a mistake, or hey,
Let's get this going. Let's even
yeah,
out.
like
Yeah.
it makes it a little bit easier once you put that relationship and there's that involved. So that's a big part of it. And then down to like systems, like having a client update sheet that gives a security, knowing that everything's taken care of. And that's a huge part of understanding if you're ready to bring somebody like a CAM into your agency. Is, are you ready? Are you ready to let go? Are you ready to trust a system? And what does that look like for you?
It's actually something really cool, Mandy. Now you have our wheels turning, but even something that an agency owner could have as a document that kind of keeps them looped in high level. For agency owners who kind of want a high level touch point to see where everybody is, that kind of document and that sort of process would be really helpful. And it's actually in our Dot and Company Asana lab, which is coming soon. So definitely look out for that. But I can imagine that document is kind of a lifeline and super useful.
Yeah, and definitely leverage your tools, especially if it's in Asana. And Asana has a portfolio view where it's very linear. However, there are some agencies that just prefer a Google Doc, and that makes sense for them too. So it's definitely taking the temperature of how granular they want the information. Do you want to know every single little detail, or do you just want that high level thing? And I think naturally it starts with, I want to know everything. For if you're the agency owner, I want to know everything. I want to see all the emails. I want to be BCC'd on everything. And then eventually what you want is for them to just be like, hey, what's going on with X, Y, and Z? And that's the goal, is to just ask questions if you need it, if you need more detail, but they should be able to answer their own questions based on some system or tracking you have.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Mandy, you are definitely the queen of tools across not just YouTube agencies, but across our entire Dot team.
Totally true.
Yeah. You're
totally
always the one
true.
with like new hacks, new tools, new this, new that. So how do you find across agencies, of course YouTube, but across agencies, how do you use different tools, and what tools would you recommend to agency owners?
Oh man, we might need a whole other podcast for that one. It's a tough landscape to keep up with because there's always something new getting developed. But I think staying tuned in to people that like other CAMs, and that's why I share so much, is because that's the way that things become more efficient, as you share the things that are working. So plugging into tools that either save time or make things more centralized. For example, Taylor knows, kind of discovered the Spark Mail app. So Spark Mail kind of integrates a chat function into an email thread. So if Taylor's CC'd on something, I don't necessarily want her to have to respond, but if I can ask a question directly in the email in a private chat,
Mhm.
And so I can say like, hey, here's a draft, or like share a draft of what I think the response is. And it allows a little bit more direct, instead of having to hop on a call and go through like, these are the emails I don't know how to answer. She can just respond real quick and not have to get too deep on it. But that and any sort of communication tool, whether it's Slack or Skype, having groups, like having a group, for example, having a Skype message with your media buyers, specific to media buyers, or having one Skype message that's just with leadership, kind of having those avenues, and that they're everyone's expected to kind of use them. So if there's something that needs to come down from, the leadership team to us to give to the media buyers, we know exactly where we're looking for that. But yeah, I mean, tools wise, the most important thing is that it works for everybody. It doesn't disrupt the workflow that is existing already. You don't want to come into an agency and ask them to change everything because it's what you like to use. So it's very much an evaluation of what's going on in the agency, and then taking that and identifying where things can be streamlined and what tools make sense.
Cool.
Mandy definitely geeks out, whether it be an extension, a cool project management tool, a reporting software. She's our go-to person for all those kind of techie questions, or the quick tech guru is what I can call you. So as we kind of wrap up here, Mandy, do you have any words, any advice? What would you say to another YouTube agency, or probably any agency really, who's looking to set up processes, make things more efficient? What's like the key takeaway?
You have to be confident where your agency is and your team, and is everybody ready to start making changes, and not just changes, I mean, improvements, strides forward. You kind of have to make sure everybody's ready for that process to start happening. It's going to require a little bit of tweaks to workflows, maybe an extra meeting here or there. But to get started, a centralized tool is a good first starting point. But the next thing beyond that is to master like the handoff, that handoff from sales, from the person who's the visionary. We want to make sure that we take his whole vision, understand it, love it, be inspired by it like he is, take it off of his plate and see it through. And so I think mastering that handoff is so important, and especially for the agency owner, because the art of letting go is a tumultuous process for some. And for some, it's people dream about it every day. Some people dread it every day. And so it really you have to know where you're at in that whole equation.
Yeah, but that's just an overarching rule for any agency owner. In some of our past podcasts, especially our one with Karen, where she talks about kind of hiring for your weaknesses and growing a team, it's definitely echoes here, right, Mandy? We have to kind of lean in sometimes as you grow. That's what happens.
Being confident in your product and being confident in your team. The processes are the next step there. Like, I feel like those two are very foundational. You can change tools, you can change offerings, you can change your services, but there's like a core foundation that like everybody has to be confident and comfortable and okay with a moderate amount of change, and just everybody has to be on the same page. And I think at that point you're ready to maybe hire a CAM, and that at that point you're ready and you can take that next step. And so I think it's important for companies as they scale to make sure that those things are in place before you bring someone in that you're going to trust to execute your vision for your entire company. So that's kind of a starting point, I would say.
Thank you, Mandy, for being on the podcast today. You showed us a lot about YouTube ads and gave us some really great insights. So we can't wait to have you on again. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
We actually have inside of our onboarding checklist the exact onboarding flow that Mandy talked about in this podcast. So head over to www.dotandcompany.co/checklist and get it for yourself. Thanks so much for listening in to another episode of the Happy Clients Podcast. Until next time.
Cheers to happy clients.